The gunshot echoed through the marble hallway before anyone understood what was happening, and by the time the driver reached the top of the staircase, Edith's Moma was already lying in a pool of her own blood, her wedding gown soaked crimson. 3 hours before she was meant to marry a man she did not love, Tobena Achara had driven for the Moma family for almost 2 years, and in that time he had learned to make himself invisible. Shadow behind tinted glass, a pair of steady hands on a steering wheel, nothing more. But invisibility became impossible the moment Edith stumbled into his arms that morning, her voice trembling as she begged him to get her away from the mansion before her father's business partner arrived to claim her as his bride. If you believe that kindness always finds its way back to the giver, and that everyone deserves a second chance at love, smash that like button right now, drop a comment below, share this story with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Whispering Tales Stories so you never miss what happens next. Chief Moma had built his fortune in shipping and oil, and like many powerful men in Lagos, he believed his daughter was simply another asset to be traded for advantage. Engineer Fabian Okoro, his business partner, was twice a Daisy's age, a man whose reputation for cruelty toward the women in his life was whispered about in every social circle that mattered. Edith had pleaded with her father for months, had cried herself to sleep more nights than she could count. But Chief Moma's mind was fixed on the merger this marriage would secure, and no amount of tears from his only daughter could move him. Tobena had watched all of this unfold from the driver's seat, ferrying Edith to bridal fittings she attended with dead eyes, listening to her stifled sobs in the back seat when she thought the partition glass hid her grief. He was not born into wealth. His mother sold Gary in Mile 12 Market, and his father had died in a construction accident when Tobena was only 14, leaving him to become the man of the house long before he was ready. He knew what it meant to carry burdens too heavy for young shoulders, and something in Edith's silent suffering called to that same wounded place in him. The morning of the wedding, chaos had already begun before the sun fully rose. Caterers arrived, decorators argued over floral arrangements, and Chief Moma paced the compound, barking orders into his phone. It was in the middle of this chaos that Fabian Okoro arrived early, drunk already, and cornered Edith in the East Wing, demanding she prove her loyalty to their union before the ceremony even began. When she resisted, he raised his hand, and in the struggle that followed, a gun that Fabian carried for protection discharged, the bullet tearing through Edith's shoulder as she fought to break free. Tobena heard the commotion from the garage and ran without thinking. He found Edith crumpled against the wall, Fabian standing over her with something between horror and rage twisting his face, and household staff frozen in the doorway too afraid to intervene against a man of such standing. Tobena did not think about his job, his salary, or the family that depended on the money he sent home every month. He simply lifted Edith into his arms and carried her out through the servants' entrance while the household staff scattered to alert Chief Moma, and he drove faster than he had ever driven in his life toward the nearest hospital, blood soaking through the sleeve of his uniform as Edith gripped his arm and begged him not to let her father find her. The hospital in Ikeja admitted her under a false name at Tobena's insistence, a decision that would later save both their lives. He sat outside the operating room for 4 hours, praying in a way he had not prayed since his father's funeral, terrified that the woman, who had become impossibly precious to him, might slip away before he ever had the courage to tell her how he felt. When the surgeon finally emerged to say she would survive, Tobena wept in the hallway like a child, unashamed of the tears that soaked into his collar. Chief Moma, once he discovered his daughter had vanished with the driver, did not call the police out of concern for her safety, but out of fury at the embarrassment before his business associates. He offered a reward for information leading to Tobena's arrest, framing the young man as a kidnapper who had taken advantage of a vulnerable young woman, twisting the entire truth to protect his own reputation and his precious merger. Fabian Okoro, meanwhile, told anyone who would listen that Tobena had attacked him and abducted Edith against her will, and because money speaks louder than truth in certain circles, many believed the lie without question. For 3 days, Tobena stayed by Edith's hospital bed under a borrowed name, feeding her broth with his own hands, changing the flowers in her room with wildflowers he picked from a roadside because he could not afford anything finer, and reading to her from an old novel he kept in his glove compartment to help pass the long hours. Edith, weak but alert, watched him with new eyes during those days, seeing not a servant but a man of extraordinary tenderness and courage, someone who had risked everything, his freedom, his livelihood, his very life, simply because he could not stand to see her suffer. On the fourth day, when Edith was strong enough to speak at length, she told Tobena something she had never told another living soul. She confessed that she had noticed him long before the wedding was ever arranged, had found herself looking forward to their morning drives, had memorized the particular way he hummed old highlife songs under his breath when he thought she wasn't listening. She had never allowed herself to hope that a man in his position could ever look at a woman in hers as an equal, let alone as someone worth loving, because the world had taught her that love was a transaction between families and fortunes, never a matter of the heart. Tobena, sitting beside her hospital bed with the afternoon sun slanting gold across the tiled floor, took her uninjured hand in his and told her the truth that had been building inside him for 2 years. He told her that from the very first week he drove for her family, he had recognized in her a loneliness that mirrored his own, and that somewhere between the school runs and the shopping trips and the quiet moments in traffic, his admiration had grown into something he had been too afraid to name. He told her that money and status had never mattered to him nearly as much as the person sitting behind him in the car, and that he would rather lose everything than watch her be handed over to a man who could never cherish her the way she deserved. Word of their location eventually reached Chief Moma through a hospital orderly bribed for information, and he arrived with security guards intent on dragging his daughter home and having Tobena arrested on the spot. But Edith, still bandaged and weak, stood before her father with a strength she had never shown him before, and declared in front of the gathering crowd that Tobena had saved her life while the man her father called family had nearly ended it. She revealed the truth of what Fabian had done, and a nurse who had treated her wound corroborated the bullet's origin, unraveling Fabian's lies in front of witnesses who could no longer be silenced by his money or his threats. Chief Moma, faced with the truth and the very public collapse of his carefully constructed story, was forced to confront what his ambition had nearly cost him. Standing in that hospital corridor, seeing his daughter's fierce loyalty to a driver he had once dismissed, as beneath his family's notice, something in him finally broke open, and for the first time in years he saw Edith not as an asset but as his child, a young woman who had nearly died because of his own blindness. If this story has touched your heart even a little, if you believe love can rewrite the plans that other people try to force upon us, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances today. Before we reach the end of this story, if you feel that true love deserves to win against all odds, type the word destiny in the comments below, and let every other viewer know that you believe kindness and courage can change even the hardest hearts. In the weeks that followed, Chief Moma severed all business ties with Fabian Okoro, whose crimes finally caught up with him as more of his past. Victims came forward once they saw that the truth could be spoken without fear. Edith recovered fully, and though her father remained a proud and complicated man, he slowly began to make peace with his daughter's choice, watching how Tobena cared for her with a devotion no amount of money could have purchased. Tobena never became a rich man overnight, and their beginning together was humble, filled with quiet dinners in his mother's small home in Mile 12 rather than the grand halls he once drove past every day. But Edith had never wanted grandeur. She had only ever wanted to be seen, to be chosen not for what she could provide but simply for who she was. And in Tobena's steady, unwavering love, she finally found the home she had been searching for all along.